Thanks again, everyone. My name is Michelle Howe, and I'm a senior consultant with Fenton Communications. As a quick visual description, I am a fair-skinned woman with long brown hair. I am wearing today green-framed glasses and a dark blue coloured top. I am coming to you today from Meanjin land. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the country throughout this land and across Australia. I pay respect to elders past, present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and people with disability. I'll now share some important accessibility and technical tips so everyone can get the most out of the event today. So as you can see, we have an Auslan interpreter and live captions are available. If you want to view those captions, just press the CC icon in your Zoom toolbar. Thanks also to everyone in the audience today who submitted questions when you registered to attend. We have used those questions to develop questions that I will ask our speakers today. And also just to let you know, we are going through a lot of information today, so our speakers have notes that they may refer to. I just wanted to let you know that. We are not using the chat function for audience questions today, but our technical team, will be posting information in the chat, and that includes contact details for the National Redress Scheme and organisations you can access if you need support. And you can also see these now on your screens. So as we only have 1 hour today, I will now welcome our speakers and I'll ask them to introduce themselves. So firstly, we're joined by Lucy Knight from the Department of Social Services, and I'll hand over to Lucy and she will introduce herself. Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks, Michelle. Hello, my name is Lucy Knight. A visual description for those interested. I'm a fair-skinned woman with a big blonde fringe and usually have some big colourful earrings on today and some blue framed glasses. My earrings, if you can see, are big pink flowers. That's my choice for today. So I work for the Department of Social Services and the National Redress Scheme, and I'm the Director of our Governance and Community Engagement section for the scheme, and I'm coming to you from Ngunnawal land. I am very excited to be here and very thankful that you are joining us today. I'm passionate about connecting people and communities, particularly around the support we can provide with the National Redress Scheme. And I just wanted to acknowledge up front that I am a person living with the experience of a disability as well. So,
wonderful. Thanks, Lucy. And we're also joined today by Linda Wiseham from People with Disability Australia. And Linda will now introduce herself. Thank you, Linda.
Hi, everyone. My name's Linda Wiseham. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joining you today from Dharawal country, land of the Wadi Wadi people. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respects to the survivors in the room and just acknowledge the courage that it takes to take those first steps forward to redress and to healing. I have short brown blonde hair and I have dyed in the pink in the back there. I have fair skin and I wear glasses. Today I'm wearing a white shirt with big blobs of pink, blue, green and orange, and I'm also a person with lived experience of disability. I'm the manager and specialist advocate for the redress team at People with Disability Australia, and we often refer to ourselves as PWDA because it can be a bit of a mouthful. I've worked in redress for over 5 years, and I've also been with PWDA for nearly 7 years. I'm deeply passionate about ensuring that people with disability receive clear information and have that genuine accessibility to that information and also to the ability to navigate the National Redress Scheme. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Linda. It's really great to have you and Lucy in the webinar today. So we'll start by hearing again from Lucy, and Lucy's going to give an overview and an update on the National Redress Scheme. After that, we will go through some of those questions and answers to those that you submitted when you registered. But first, I'll hand back to Lucy. Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks, Michelle. I did want to acknowledge, Michelle mentioned in the beginning, I am referring to notes. This is a really important topic for us to be talking through today. And I want to make sure I've got nothing, like I don't forget anything as we go through. So please excuse me as I do that. So let's talk about the scheme. So the National Redress Scheme is here to help people who have experienced institutional-based child sexual abuse. And it's around their opportunities to gain access to counselling, a direct personal response, and a redress payment. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress through the webinar. The purpose of the scheme is to acknowledge that this abuse occurred and to hold Australian institutions accountable for the sexual abuse of children who were in their care. We commenced in July 2018, and as of 4 July this year, we have received over 64,000 applications, and that's a significant number. 34% of those applications indicate they are people with a disability. And we do know that people with disability are at a higher risk of experiencing violence and abuse, including sexual abuse and sexual abuse as a child. People with disability are therefore a really key focus for the department and for the National Redress Scheme. One of the things we do know, though, is there are significant barriers that can be faced by people with disabilities when they're wanting to access the scheme, and they might find it hard to either disclose the abuse they've gone through or they've experienced while in an institution and find it difficult to report it. This is where we talk to and we really appreciate the roles of family members, support people and workers, the broader disability sector, and the critical role that you can play in supporting people with disability to help overcome these barriers. The webinar today is one of the steps we're taking as a scheme to help support and raise awareness of the scheme and increase visibility so that people with a disability and the support services available have access and can look at what their own redress journey might mean to them. We as a scheme are committed ensuring as many people as possible who may be entitled to redress have the ability to apply and do so before the scheme applications finish in June 2027. So it's July 2025. We only are open to receive applications to June 2027. Thank you again for your attendance and support today. I really do want to thank Linda and PWDA for hosting this event on our behalf. We really appreciate that. We'll talk a little bit later on. But PWDA is one of the redress support services, and one of the amazing services we provide is the ability to support applicants in access and go through the redress journey with the National Redress Scheme. Thanks, Michelle, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Lucy. That was a really wonderful overview and a really important scene setting. So now we'll start going through some of the questions that we received from the audience when they registered for today's event. And again, thanks for submitting those questions. Lucy, I'll start with you again. Can you tell us in what situations people apply to the scheme?
The scheme is focused on sexual abuse when you were a child at an institution, and I'll talk through what that means a little bit. So first of all, an institution could be a school, could be a church, a mission, orphanage, foster care, hospital, detention centre or sporting club, or any sort of club. Sexual abuse could have happened at the institution itself, or it could be associated with an activity of the institution. And an example of that could be while they were taking swimming lessons or something like that. There is a few criteria for someone to be eligible for redress, and I'll quickly run through those for you. So a person may be eligible if they experienced sexual abuse when they were under the age of 18. They were born before the 30th of June 2010. The abuse happened before the 1st of July 2018 while they were at an institution, and they were an Australian, or they are an Australian citizen or permanent resident when they're applying to the scheme. Now, if you are a support person, support worker or a legal nominee, you can play a really important role to help people decide on whether or not they wish to apply. A person with a disability may want some help understanding the scheme itself and also perhaps meeting the requirements of the application process. And that could be help filling out the application form or support when understanding what the questions we ask as we go through. I mentioned the redress support services before, which PWDA is one of them. We have a number of specialist support services around the country that can provide practical and emotional support to people with a disability and their support people working either before someone applies for the scheme, during their application process, and after they apply as well. So it's not just about the application form, it's about the whole journey for a person applying to the scheme. If you or someone you know wish to apply for the scheme, you will need to fill out an application form, and it will need to be submitted before the 30th of June 2027. That's a summary of our eligibility criteria. Michelle, I might go back to you now.
Yeah, sure, great, thank you. But I might just stick with you, Lucy, just for now. I just wondered on the back of that information, if you can explain, just so people know, what are they actually applying for when they apply for redress, so people know what outcomes might be available to them? Thanks,
Yeah.
Lucy.
Absolutely. Really good question. There's 3 outcomes of redress that a person can be eligible for. I'll walk through what those are, but it is important to know that a person eligible for redress can accept all 3, 1 or 2, or none. So it's up to the person applying when they've made an offer of redress is made. Their choice is in their hands on what they would like to do with that outcome. The first component of redress is a monetary component. This payment amount, it's calculated based on the individual experience of the sexual abuse. So it's based on what's provided in the application form and supporting material provided with the application form. And it also looks at the impact and the person's vulnerability. So the impact the abuse had on that person and the person's vulnerability at the time of the abuse. Some circumstances, I should mention that the payment can be up to $150,000. It can be less than, but it can be up to 150 based on the individual circumstances. In some circumstances, there may be an opportunity for what we would consider an advance payment. That's not in all circumstances, and there's particular requirements that we would look at for that. And the scheme would, if you might be eligible for an advance payment, the scheme would invite you to apply for that. When it comes to the redress amount, it can either be paid as a lump sum or it can be paid by instalments. And that's really important to consider when we get to the redress offer perspective and how you might want to receive that amount of money. Now, the second component of redress, and from my perspective, I'll throw a personal note, one of the most critical parts of the redress journey is what we call a direct personal response. A direct personal response is from the institution found responsible, and it's something similar to either a formal apology or a letter of acknowledgement. It could even be a face-to-face meeting or a virtual meeting or something like that. Some of the direct personal responses have been some applicants have had an opportunity to meet with officials of the institution and share their experience and share the impact of what that sexual abuse did to them as a child and how it's impacted the rest of their life and their family. Some people have asked for and received an apology. And some people are interested in things like, well, what is the institution doing now to keep our children safe? So that direct personal response is quite a personal thing. It is something that the scheme can facilitate and support, and it'll be working with you and the institution around what that would look like for you. The third component is access to counselling and psychological care. Now, counselling and psychological care is provided through states and territory governments, and I think that's an important point I want to make is the Australian government, the Commonwealth government is in partnership with the states and territories when we're delivering the scheme. States and territories provide access to counselling and psychological care for applicants who live within their area when redress is made available to a person. This includes counselling and access to services from people with expertise in supporting people who have experienced childhood sexual abuse. And it includes a minimum of 20 hours of counselling. And it's something that can be used over your lifetime or over the applicant's lifetime. If you're interested in more details around the 3 elements of redress, pop onto the National Redress Scheme website and you can have a look at a little bit more information regarding that. Thanks, Michelle.
Great, thanks, Lucy. And I will just add that on the National Redress Scheme website, there are also some wonderful case studies where you can hear people talking about the application process and the journey they went through to receive that redress, including some people talking about, I guess, the importance and the impact of the direct personal response that Lucy mentioned there. But it would be great now to bring you in, Linda. So I just wondered if you could tell us about the type of support that you personally and your organisation, PWDA, provide to people with a disability when they apply to the scheme. Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Michelle. PWDA have a redress team that is specifically working with individuals who want to apply for redress, and we are all very trauma informed. We've done a lot of trauma training, and we also have done a lot of work within the disability sector and have that understanding of people's needs and how we can work with people with disability. Our redress support services provide personal one-on-one assistance throughout the application process. So we help people to write those applications so they don't have to write them at all. We go through that journey with them and make sure that the application is exactly how they want it to be, and then that application gets sent off to the scheme. We support people with all forms of disability, including mental health as well. A lot of times people aren't sure whether a disability service will work specifically with those with psychosocial disability. We do. We help them to access the scheme, and also with referrals to other services if they need them. Our service does not impact on anybody's NDIS or disability support pension. So we are a fully funded free service. And we do not require evidence of a person's disability. If you tell us you have a disability, we will believe you. Some examples of the support that we use. We help by simplifying complex language. Often the applications can be quite lengthy and they'll ask things and people aren't sure what they're asking or what they need to put in there. So we can assist with that kind of thing. We support clients to articulate their story in a way that the scheme are looking for, to make sure that there are things in there that is probably being looked for. The person didn't think, oh, maybe I should have put that in or not. So we help with that sort of stuff by asking some trauma-informed questions to get the best story for the application. We offer accessible formats and communication supports. So we have a lot of easy reads and visual tools and plain language explanations. We also work in collaboration with other services. So mental health professionals, to ensure that somebody's mental health is being looked after whilst they are going through this process, because it can be quite a triggering traumatic process for them. So we need to look after their safety there. We also work with other disability specialists, and just in case if people need to receive any emotional or cognitive support. And we also work with Auslan interpreters. We can work by assisting people with any augmentative communication devices and stuff like that. Where appropriate, we do outreach to rural and remote communities, and we can assist people in that way, face-to-face if necessary. Most of our stuff's done online. We try to ensure flexibility, and we definitely ensure dignity remains central throughout our engagement with the person.
Great. Thanks so much, Linda. Thank you. And I'll just bring you back in, Lucy. Can you tell us about a bit more about that application process, including we had quite a few questions coming through from people who registered about generally how long it will take? Thank you, Lucy.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Absolutely. Linda, you made a comment about treating people with dignity, and I love that. So I just acknowledge that. So thank you. That's, I think, the most central thing when it goes through this process. It's a difficult process. There's no ifs or buts about it. It is difficult. And maintaining a person's dignity is really key to how we go through. On that note, there's 3 main types of information we're going to need coming through it. It's going to sound simple. It's not. First is personal information. So we're going to need to know who you are, how we contact you. If you do have a Centrelink reference number, that can be provided to us because we can use that to help establish your identification and a whole range of things like that. So everything up front is all about who you are, so we know who the application relates to and what that means. The second bit of information is where it gets a little bit more difficult. We're going to need to know about the abuse experienced by the person applying to the scheme. We want to know as much detail as you're able to, and I want to acknowledge that particularly when you go through traumatic events, memory is not reliable and it is very difficult. So we ask you to do the best that you can and provide information in the best way that you're able to do so. We would like as much information as available to you that you can apply about the institution where the abuse occurred and how that impacted the person as they were applying. We've had things provided, for example, school photos, a whole range of things, pictures of an institution, anything like that the person might have access to would be worthwhile. I do want to say, if you're feeling the need to go and get further information to support your application, talk to your redress support service in doing that, talk to your people around that, and they can work through what would be beneficial and what would not be beneficial. The last thing that we need with our application forms is a signature and a date. And again, that speaks to who you are and that you're agreeing to your information being provided to the scheme, and that we know that what you've signed is true and correct through the process as well. I mentioned it's difficult. It is, and that's again our redress support services are available, and the support people in an applicant's life and family members, if they're willing to share that information, are available to support the applicant going through that person. I think I do want to go back is if you have information available or if the person has information available, provide it. But if they don't, that should not prevent a person from applying to the scheme. As much as you have or as much as a person has is appropriate and enough for an application to be lodged with us. I've touched on getting help and we've talked about the specialist redress support services, and PWDA is definitely one of our specialist support services. Our website, the National Redress Scheme website, has a full list of all of the redress support services available across the country. Some provide services to a location, some provide them nationally, some provide them to men, some provide them to women. So there's a whole different range of services available as you go through. The reason why that these support services have been chosen is because they specialise in the particular support needed for people who are applying and working through this process. They have a deep understanding of the scheme itself, and they work closely with us in facilitating access to the scheme, and it's really important that we do that. They also make sure that we have safe and culturally appropriate support for anyone interested in applying for the scheme. I also wanted to acknowledge that anyone, an applicant or a person who's thinking about applying for a scheme can ask anyone to support them. And as a disability support worker, that could be a role that you may be asked to play, or you may identify someone that you think may benefit from applying from the scheme, and you're welcome to do so. The scheme has a process that's called redress nominee, where you can nominate, or the person applying to the scheme can nominate either an assistance nominee or a legal nominee to act on their behalf with the scheme. So there is a difference between an assistance nominee and a legal nominee, and that depends on the decision-making powers that the applicant is choosing to provide to the nominee as they go through. As a minimum, will help with receiving correspondence, can make phone calls and contacts through to the scheme. I do want to point out that if an applicant chooses, a redress support service can be a nominee, as well as supporting them through the application process too. Just a little bit more from a legal nominee. One of the main differences with a legal nominee is they can actually make a decision on behalf of the applicant if the applicant agrees for that person to be a legal nominee. I think that's all I want to touch on from a nominee perspective, but I do want to talk about access a little bit broader. When contacting the scheme, we do have access to interpreters, translating services, and interpreters, including Auslan as well. So if you are, or if you require assistance with interpreters, and you're accessing the scheme or you're doing so on someone's behalf, you can request for appointments with interpreters and things like that, and we can facilitate that on your behalf. I do want to acknowledge that applications can be lodged in paper, so we have paper application forms, but we can also, applicants can choose to link their MyGov accounts to National Redress Scheme through MyGov and lodge an electronic application. And depending on how the applicant works with their support person, they may be able to assist them with the electronic application process that goes through as well. I might, if it's okay, I'll just touch on what happens after you lodge your application and what that means as we go through. You mentioned, Michelle, the question around processing timeframes. They're long. I need to tell you that up front, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We'll go through, so when an application that comes into the scheme, the first thing we do is we check we have everything we need. This is a difficult process, and we don't want to have to ask for more information than what we need. So we do a really good check up front to make sure we've covered off all the personal information. We know who the applicant is. We've got enough details around the abuse that occurred. We can identify the institution, everything's signed, and those sort of things. If further information is needed, because we might not have enough up front, we might send a letter to an applicant and ask for some further information. That information will be then provided and be part of the application process as it goes through. Once we have everything, I should mention, an institution doesn't need to be already participating with the scheme for a person to apply. So we ask you to tell us about the institution. If the institution has already joined the scheme, and there's a list on our website of participating institutions, there's nothing further that needs to happen. If the institution is not participating in the scheme, we will then work with the institution to have them participate on your behalf. So there's no action that you need to take, but I do want to acknowledge that if they're not currently participating, it might take a little bit more time to get them on board, so we can then look at assessing your application as it goes through. Once we have everything that we need for the application, it goes through to an independent decision maker. Now, an independent decision maker is independent, uses all the information you've provided in the application and any other supplementary information that we have available to make a determination on your redress. So that determination is going to consider whether or not you meet the eligibility requirements for the scheme, but also make a decision on an institution's responsibility in that process. And that's how we get to make an offer of redress after those determinations have been made. We've got on our website, and the average time for processing an application sits between 12 and 18 months. So I'll say that again, it is between 12 and 18 months. And I do want to highlight it is an average. Some happen quicker, but there's also some that don't happen in that time frame and do take longer. And that there's a number of circumstances that will impact the application processing time. But I think the message I want to give is it is a complex process. It's a complex decision we're wanting to make, and we want to make sure we have all the information available to make those decisions. I do want to highlight that as a scheme, we're doing everything we can to reduce those processing times, but they're long, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. I think that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say. Michelle, I might go back to you.
Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you, Lucy. And just reiterating what Lucy said there, as there was a lot of detail. So just a reminder that all of that information is available on the National Redress Scheme website. And that website address has been popped in the chat. It is nationalredress.gov.au. And I'll also just read out the scheme phone number, which we will provide in the chat as well. It is 1800 737 377. And I'll move on to our next question. It would be really great to bring you back in, Linda, here. So we've heard a bit so far today about when, why, and how people can apply for redress. But I'd just like it if you could expand a bit on anything you've seen in your work that may present a barrier to people with disability accessing the scheme and how your work helps overcome that or to address those barriers. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michelle. Look, I think firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that many people with disability who've told their story have been disbelieved or dismissed, sometimes even mistreated by people that they've confided in. They've sometimes been turned away by lawyers because they're, not a witness that they think that they could use in a civil case. So, it's really tough for people with disability to be able to, once they've had these things happen to them, to come forward to a redress support service or to ask somebody to help them with this, because they probably feel like that might happen to them again. So because it can cause really long-lasting trauma and contribute to the formal processes. So I'd really like to acknowledge that, and that just to make it really clear that redress support services, not just ours, but all of them, have been very much trained in this, because we've seen and heard it a lot. And, we will work with a person in a way that will make them more comfortable to be able to share that story and feel like they're believed. We work really hard to build trust and respectful relationships with people. We try to provide consistent, trauma-informed, person-centred, work with them throughout the process, and answer any questions in a way that they understand. And if they don't understand, we ask them about that, and we try to find a way for them to understand what we're trying to tell them. I think one of the biggest barriers that we come across for people with disability is the lack of awareness of the scheme. I think that's a really big thing, because it can impact a person actually knowing that they can apply to the scheme. They might not have any idea about the scheme. So we have trouble engaging with a lot of disability services to be able to raise awareness of the scheme and educating both clients and staff of those services. Some instances, services might be a responsible institution, so that makes them feel like it can further complicate our efforts to engage with them, because they're probably wondering, why are you coming to us? What's happening here? Should we be speaking to you? And we have to kind of let them know this is the process and this is how we're doing it, and just build a bit of a rapport with them to be able to get some information through, so that their clients and staff know that the scheme is there. We've done this a lot by actively engaging in community outreach. We've also done education sessions, and with DSS, we've provided quite a lot of targeted redress workshops across the country in all different states. The aim is to provide very clear information and make sure that information is accessible. And I'd like to highlight that here, because for people with disability, there might be a lot of information roaming around, but is that accessible to them? So we try to work with people to find out what accessibility needs that they have, and ensure that they have them catered to. We also try to ensure that people are aware of their rights, their eligibility, and also support them through the whole application process from beginning to end. We've also had some challenges working in rural and remote communities. So PWDA make a really big effort to go to these communities. We believe that just because you're a small town, you still have the right to know that this scheme is there. There may be 2 people in that town, who knows? And if we don't go out there and speak to people, then they might never know, might never have heard of it. So we do a lot of outreach and engagements, and we travel a lot of distances, and we find that some of the barriers for people is that they have to travel a lot of distances. They have lack of local advocates that can help them, or they might even have poor digital connectivity. So access to the redress website, for example, if they don't have a computer and they struggle to see that website on their phone and try to locate information on their phone, or even if they're older and they don't use the internet at all. So we try to get that information out there and get a lot of paper information out there as well for that accessibility for people also. So many redress support services deliver a lot of educational presentations via online platforms as well. And we will also engage interpreters when necessary for people. We do this to, once again, raise awareness and build trust and provide accessible information. Some complex support needs and accessibility barriers that we come across. Many applicants with disability have experienced disrupted or limited access to education. And we find that a lot from people who have been in the foster care system, for example, or even in institutional care for their childhood and juvenile justice, so on and so forth. A lot of disability homes, that sort of thing. We come across a lot of clients who have difficulty with their memory, their comprehension, communication, of being able to communicate what actually happened to them, and sometimes even processing that information that we're giving them. So all of that can impact on their ability to read the application and be able to write in the application and understand of what the application process is asking from them. The process, and I want to make this one really, really clear, the process of retelling your story can be quite distressing. Like you are sharing things with a person that you don't know, and these are your deepest private things. So, trying to do that on your own can sometimes be even harder. So that's why we suggest to speak to somebody who's had that training in that and can give you that trauma support and be able to assist you to do that application. The application, and I'll just say it to you straight, is very long. And if you have multiple institutions, it becomes longer. And if there are multiple people involved, it becomes longer again. So once again, we will do all of that for you. And it can also, sometimes there's barriers for people engaging independently with the National Redress Scheme. Not everybody feels comfortable phoning a government agency and having those conversations. We can do that for you. So as assistive nominees, that's our role. So speak to us and we can do that. Survivors with psychosocial disability also face additional challenges. And they may need increased support, particularly around safeguarding their mental health and wellbeing, particularly if they've already got a lot of mental health challenges that's happening for them. We ensure a duty of care and make sure that they're safe throughout the process. And we can take breaks. We don't have to do it all in one go. We can do it in a week if they want to, or we can do it, over 6 months if they need, whatever time period they need. We work with it. We are not time limited. As I said, we're fully funded, so we can do that. Some of the barriers around survivors of psychosocial, my stutter's coming in, I apologise, for psychosocial disability. It can be, accessing appropriate mental health care. And we all know that's a big one. Trying to access that care can be quite challenging. And when you're navigating, a complex and under-resourced mental health system, it can be difficult. Another barrier is also for applicants who live with an acquired brain injury, cognitive disability, or also sensory disabilities. So we can work around all of those things as well and assist with those. And assist with support people who are assisting with people with those disabilities as well. So we are more than happy to have them involved in the process with the client's permission. So from beginning to end, no problem at all. Many applicants also face some physical and communication barriers. So that includes, accessible face-to-face communication support, mobility barriers. Some have those more specific supports they might require, like AAC, which is augmentative or alternative communication, or also acquiring Auslan interpreters, particularly for a time when they're having a session with their redress support worker. So the redress support worker will do all of that background stuff.
Right.
We also address the barriers by providing the flexible, person-centred support that adapts to their individual needs. What else do we do? We also provide all of the accessible resources, as I mentioned before. And if people need resources in language, we can always speak to the scheme as well. And they provide us with these awesome books that are all in language, and also some brochures and stuff. And we can get that information as well. One of the biggest barriers that we also come across is the complex language and legal terminology, particularly if a applicant needs to speak with one of the legal services. Legal services are great. They will give you all of your legal options. They will give you your options around redress, around civil, around whether there should be, whether you should consider a criminal, all of that sort of stuff. But lawyers are lawyers. So they can talk very fast, and they can use a lot of complex language. Our role is to make sure, like, we can sit with clients through those meetings, and we can make sure that the clients understand exactly what the lawyer is saying. And we have no problem with saying, I'm sorry, Miss Lawyer, you need to actually slow down or repeat that, because I don't think you've quite explained it well enough for the client to understand. We'll often ask the client, did you understand that? And often we'll get yes, and then we'll say, okay, so what did you understand? And sometimes they haven't actually understood it all, so we ask the lawyer to re-explain it to them in a way that they understand. So that's our role there. So our role is not being a lawyer, but our role is to ensure that anything that a lawyer provides to somebody, they know what they're listening to, and they know what they're signing off on. So and that's very much a part, about their rights to know. So so we understand, with understanding the rights, completing the forms, making informed decisions about their redress journey, what they want to do. Once again, the simplified language, the accessible materials all play a role in this. We also collaborate with legal services like No More. We also collaborate with a lot of other local legal services as well when they are in on country or around rural, remote communities. And we're happy to work with anybody that the client is already engaged with or would like to engage with. There's another barrier that I'd like to quickly speak on, and this one I think is really important. This barrier is a barrier to access privacy and safety in institutional settings. So, excuse me, we know that a lot of people still live in institutional settings, and we know that getting access to privacy when they are talking about their redress application or their sexual abuse can be pretty tricky. So some of the institutional settings that I refer to are prison settings. They can also be disability homes, SDAs, where there are other people roaming around the house that live there with you, or workers in and around the house that move in and around freely. And you might be wanting to have a conversation privately, and there's people knocking on the door, walking in, so on and so forth. So that's one barrier. Other barriers are also, having that confidentiality stuff there. So being able to get the application to the client so that they can read it and sign off on it without other people seeing what is in that application, because that's deeply private information. So we work really, really hard to ensure that that is for the client's eyes only. If they choose to share that with their support worker or whoever, then that is their choice to do so. That is not our choice for that to go out to them. So what we do. So I've lost my train of thought, sorry. So we just advocate and work closely with DSS also, particularly around addressing barriers. And I know Lucy has been really, really helpful on a number of times when there's been some tricky things for people with disability where they've got some physical barriers. that is preventing them to speak to the scheme, and they've been uber helpful to make that happen for that client so that their application gets lodged and moves forward. And yeah, I think that's
Great.
yep. Thank you, Michelle.
Linda. No, thank you. That's really, really comprehensive and wonderful information. So we really appreciate you sharing all of that. And Lucy, I will go back to you just on a related question to some of those barriers. So what can people do in practice if they're finding it hard to put together that application? Because you also touched on the type of information or support kind of evidence that's required. So if people are having trouble, for instance, tracking down relevant documents or evidence, what can they do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And thank you for the opportunity to expand on that. Because we are talking about abuse before the age of 18, we are talking historical abuse. So not only may you not have access to records, the records may not exist, or your memory might be significantly impacted, as I talked before. We have come across some situations where whole streams of records were ruined through fires and floods and things like that. I wanted to acknowledge the Royal Commission into Institutional Child Sexual Abuse acknowledge that very much so, going through that and establishing the scheme. The Australian government has acknowledged that further, and we are working with, it's going to be a strange term, it's a concept of proof that is reasonably likely. So it is a lower level of proof considered when you look at civil or criminal court proceedings. So you don't need to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt or anything like that. That's my very unlegal way of saying things. Basically, reasonable likelihood means that it is reasonably likely you experienced abuse the way you've described it within the environment of that institution or an activity associated with that institution. That's why we ask you provide as much information that you can. So if you can't remember or you don't have access to records or you're worried that records exist, I feel like I want to say, let us worry about that for you. We're here to help you. Provide as much information as you can. Linda described it really well, that a redress support service can help support in writing that information down and supporting your application process and in sharing your journey in such a way that the scheme can pick up and run with the detail, and we can see what we can request on your behalf. So access to information or lack of access to information should not prevent you from lodging an application. If there is anything missing, if we think we need something further, we'll be in contact with you. So we're likely to send you a letter asking for some specific further information, and you can ring the scheme and then talk to us. So the phone number that Michelle talked about before, you're able to ring the scheme and talk to us about it. You can speak to the scheme directly if you've got concerns about what records you have could or could not access, but you're also welcome to speak to your redress support services. They're very, very experienced in how to work through and navigate those issues. At the end of the day, the scheme is here for survivors, and we want to ensure that people get access to redress if they're entitled and eligible for as they go through the process.
Yeah, sure. And just reiterating one point, that applicants can provide extra information after they have applied. Just want to confirm that one as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
I think it was in my notes. I missed that.
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. But I think that's important. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and we do have quite a lot of cases where you don't remember that you had something and a memory sparks.
Of course.
The process says, oh, actually, and you can lodge that at any stage before the outcome is made. So an offer is made.
Great, thanks, Lucy. And we touched a bit on lawyers, the legal threshold. Linda talked about their services working with some of those other legal services. But one question we also got that I'd like to confirm for people is legal assistance for redress. If people do want to access legal assistance, how can people access that? And do they need a lawyer?
Okay, love this question. I want to make it very, very clear. I'm going to come across quite firm with this. You do not require a lawyer to access the scheme. I do want to say, and Linda covered it off really well, if you're choosing to, or if the applicant is choosing to, you are not prevented from doing that. In fact, the scheme has engaged no more legal services to provide free legal support, and it's free. They will not charge you. I want to be clear, there's some lawyers who do charge a fee for this service. It is not a requirement that that happens. And in fact, we do have the free services available through No More Legal Services. No More is available across the country, so they can manage their engagement over the phone. They also have offices in Adelaide, Brisbane, Darwin, Melbourne, Perth and Sydney, and they travel to a lot of remote locations or regional locations as well. You can find more information about No More and the services they offer on their website. So No More with a K, excuse me. That little tickle sitting in the back of my throat. You can access the National Redress Scheme website, and they can provide some additional information about the services No More offer. Again, you do not require a lawyer. If you choose to do so, you're welcome to do so. And as Linda said, our redress support services will work alongside who you choose to engage us through that process now. Applicant choice is really critical for us in this process. Thanks,
Excellent.
Michelle.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lucy. So we're nearing the end of the session today, but I wanted to ask you, Lucy, just two more questions so that we received during the registration process. And again, they're important ones. So the first one is, what are the options for people for appealing a decision that has been made regarding their application to the scheme?
Yeah, good question. You can absolutely ask for a review after you've received your outcome. So we talked earlier about an independent decision maker making a determination. As a result of that, you'll receive a letter. In that letter, you'll receive your outcome of redress. And linking back to what I was saying earlier, it'll talk about the three components. So the payment amount, the access to a direct personal response, and the counselling and psychological care services. If you are not happy with your outcome, you can talk to the scheme and we can talk you through what that means for you, and you do get the ability to ask for a review of decision. I do want to say you can only ask for one review, and I should have said up front as well, you can only apply for the scheme once. So when you apply for a review, there's a particular form that you need to complete, and we can provide you with copies of that form. Your support service can also support you in doing so. You're also allowed to or can provide additional information as part of that review. When we do that review, it will be given to a new independent decision maker. So it's not going back to the same person. A new decision maker will have a look at all of the information and then will make a determination or have a decision on an outcome as a result of that. There's a couple of different options that can come out of that. It could be that your redress outcome could be the same, stay the same. It could mean that if an offer was made, it may increase the dollar amount or decrease the dollar amount. And it could mean a completely different decision is made. As with every review, it'll be considered on the merits of the information provided and supported with that. And there could be different sort of outcomes that could go through that. And again, if that's something that you're thinking about, we would very much encourage you to speak with No More and your redress support services around what your options are and what that might look like for you as you go through. And you can contact the scheme and talk to the scheme directly if interested.
Sure.
I think that's it for that one.
Great, thank you. And just letting people know that contact details for No More, who we've been referring to today, have also been popped in the chat. And we'll just wrap up with one final question. Lucy, what should people do if they need to report abuse?
Yeah, really, really critical question. Immediately, if you were concerned about your safety or your own personal situation or that of someone else, you'd be contacting emergency services, going through to 000 for any critical issues or things like that. If you are concerned that someone is still at risk or being harmed, that's exactly what I was just saying. Sorry, repeating myself there in slightly different ways, but contact 000. That is probably the most critical thing. Don't come through to the scheme for those things.
Okay.
Participating institutions across the country, every state and territory have their mandatory reporting requirements when it comes to child safe reports. So they must, if they identify an abuser is still acting or doing some certain things or someone is still at risk, they must follow their relevant legislation and must lodge some child safe reporting through that. The scheme also will consider if there's information available to the scheme that might mean a child safe report needs to be made. And if that's the case, we'll contact the relevant state or territory where the institution exists and where the applicant now lives and let them know. And they might take that information and based on what the applicant is willing to share with us and then consider what actions they may take as a result around that. Your redress support services are there for support and to guide survivors and some support workers for survivors in going through that. So you're welcome to reach out to them too. You may also choose to lodge a complaint directly with the institution, and that is something that you may make a decision to do so, and that's independent of the scheme. And I feel like I want to say that support services can also guide you in what that might look like for your perspective too.
Okay, great, thank you. So we're just about out of time, so we'll wrap up the questions there. But before we close, I'd like to thank Linda and Lucy for their time and the amazing information they've provided today. I hope everyone's found it really useful. And I'd particularly like to thank PWDA again for hosting the event today. Thank you. And finally, thank everyone for joining. And just a reminder, if you need support, there are contact details that we displayed on screen and in the chat. Contact information for the National Redress Scheme is also in the chat. The National Redress Scheme phone number again is 1800 737 377, and there are those support service contact details on the screen. And the National Redress Scheme website is nationalredress.gov.au. And so that brings us to the end today. Thanks so much, everybody, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.